By the early 20th century, the global map for the Muslim world was collapsing. The Ottoman Empire was fracturing under pressure from European powers, and millions of Indian Muslims lived as subjugated subjects of British colonial rule. Inside these shrinking borders, the community was paralyzed by sectarianism and a lack of high ambition. Generations had fallen into blind imitation, what scholars call taqlid, repeating the rote traditions of the past without producing new dynamic thought. Allama Muhammad Iqbal looked at this decay and felt its weight personally. He did not simply observe the community's decline. He lived the exhaustion of a people who had forgotten their own worth. He poured that grief into poetry, pleading with the divine to wake his people up. He prayed, "Grant us the realization of our disaster, and in the chaos of today, give us the foresight for tomorrow." Iqbal described his own role through a heavy metaphor, writing, "I am the wailing nightingale of a ruined garden. I beg for my words to have an impact." But he came to a difficult realization. Mourning a lost empire would not save it. Rebuilding the Ummah would require a total transformation of how Muslims viewed their own potential. In 1905, Iqbal traveled to Europe to study at Cambridge and Munich. He spent 3 years immersed in Western philosophy and political thought. He eventually rejected Western materialism and jingoistic nationalism, seeing them as forces that stripped humanity of spiritual purpose. Iqbal observed that the Ummah's true vulnerability lay in the loss of its own self, a spiritual void that left them susceptible to external control. He voiced this crisis in his poem Shikwa, or The Complaint. It captured the quiet resentment Muslims felt as they questioned why God had seemingly withdrawn his grace, allowing them to fall into poverty and political weakness while others prospered. He followed this with Jawab-e-Shikwa, the answer. Here, Iqbal confronted the community directly. He argued that heaven had not abandoned them. They had abandoned the dynamic spirit of Islam, choosing passivity over the courage of their ancestors. For Iqbal, external political liberty was impossible to achieve, while the internal spirit remained diseased by a sense of helplessness. Iqbal defined Khudi, or selfhood, as a rigorous process of inner development and self-reliance. It requires the individual to recognize their inner power and apply independent reasoning to modern problems, effectively shattering the chains of intellectual stagnation. To make this philosophy actionable for the youth, he presented the Shaheen, or falcon. This bird became the ultimate model for realizing their own Khudi. The Shaheen does not build a nest, remaining unbound by material attachments. It flies high above the dying world, hunting its own prey, refusing charity. A person who reaches this level of self-realization becomes the mard-e-momen, the true believer. This individual combines a body of steel with a heart of compassion, bridging the gap between faith and reason. By 1930, Iqbal turned these spiritual concepts into a political imperative. In his Allahabad address, he proposed the creation of a separate Muslim state in northwestern India to protect the community's renewed identity. He had taken the abstract concepts of spiritual selfhood and converted them into a concrete geopolitical roadmap. Spiritual awakening was now the foundation for a new nation. Allama Iqbal passed away in 1938, but his intellectual labor ignited the movement that became Pakistan. His philosophy gave a divided people the collective courage to demand independence. In August 1947, the dream became a physical reality. A sovereign homeland was established, where Muslims could live freely and act as global ambassadors for their values. Before the borders of a new nation were ever drawn on a map, they were first established in the visionary poetry and spiritual struggle of Allama Iqbal. Iqbal's work isn't a relic of the past, it's an institution for the modern era. The dangerous forces of intellectual laziness and consumer materialism are just as active today as they were a century ago. His work requires that the youth look past their external circumstances and instead study the intellectual and courageous history of their ancestors. It demands the active cultivation of your own Khudi. You must develop the independence and the high-flying ambition of the Shaheen to meet the challenges of a new age. Reforming a society starts with reforming the individual. True freedom only begins with the profound awakening of the self. An awakened mind cannot be colonized. The realization of Khudi serves as the necessary foundation for true independence.